Well, good morning, church. As we all know, today is Good Friday, which we know is really good news for us and not so much for Jesus and what's about to happen, because we know he's about to go to the cross and make the ultimate payment for our sins. But we'll talk all about that during our Good Friday services this evening at 3 and 6 p.m. But today, as we continue on in our devotionals of learning Christ, I want to take a look at something that happens with Jesus at the trial. Something that is so just part of our human nature is this desire to defend ourselves. As soon as someone says something against us that isn't true or that we don't like, it's like we toss out everything else about ourselves and we're like, no, I'm going to go into this conversation right now and I'm going to win it. I know we're all in these stay-at-home orders and are with our family members all the time, so these feelings might be even escalated right now. This past weekend, even my wife and I were having conversations, more like arguments, and slowly throughout that conversation, I could feel my heart start to shift to want to just win, to be right. But as we all know, in any conversation, in any relationship or marriage, man, if someone wins an argument, everybody loses, right? Why? Because our desire then is just about winning and it's ourselves instead of coming to a good conclusion and instead of being faithful. Jesus models this better than anyone. When we look at Matthew 27, after he went through the trials with the high priest, he goes over to the governor, and we pick up in verse 11. It says, "Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'You have said so,' Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, 'Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?' But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor." Now, why did Jesus do this? Why did Jesus not go and defend himself? He was in the right. Everything that they were saying against him that wasn't true, he could have stood up for himself and been correct and went and said, "No, I'm right in this situation," but he didn't. Why? It's because he had a bigger view of what was going on in mind. Throughout every single thing that was thrown against him, he realized that he was living within the purpose and that defending himself would prevent him from living out the purpose that God had set before him and set for his life. So church, I know in my own life, in my own conversations, I've tried to be right and I've tried to be faithful at the same time, but I'm slowly learning that most times that's not possible. I can't be right and win an argument and still be faithful to God. So the challenge as we learn Christ, would we choose to be faithful in every single conversation, even when people are putting things against us that aren't true? Would we choose faithfulness? Would we realize that maybe by not giving an answer, by not giving a quick defense, and instead trusting that God will defend us? And would we realize that that might be part of God's plans for our lives, and it might open up opportunities for us to share the gospel? My friends, I pray that we would continue on learning Christ.